Antonio Bustamante is the co founder and CEO of Bem, an AI data interface company that transforms messy, unstructured inputs into decision ready data so engineers and AI agents can power ambient, automated business systems. With that, Antonio, we're thrilled to have you at the live event today, and I am very much looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much, Michael. I actually come today to talk a little bit about production AI and what a production ready AI system actually requires, and why most enterprise pilots never really make it past the demo is what we call black box, glass box. The most important thing is, so we work primarily with companies where 0.5% error rate is extremely damaging, right? And so when 0.5% means millions, you should know your error rate. What we see is that most enterprise AI pilots, especially the ones that are trying to automate day to day operations, they're scored on whether the model gets it right, not when it gets it wrong and improve from it. And so, what we're learning over and over is that the model is not the bottleneck anymore. The system around it is. Most model labs are already realizing this. OpenAI famously recently posted that the model isn't even the product anymore. What the product is what we've been calling in the industry the harness. And so, what black box failure looks like in production is pretty much the same across most critical industries that I work with. When it comes to, for example, insurance, which is just permeating our entire industry, when a model approves a claim with a misread line item, the downstream system pays for it. Right. And so that error surfaces an audit, and that liability is already in your balance sheet. Similarly, with government, we see extraction, misreading tariff codes, assigning it the wrong codes and tags continuously until someone is flagging it 6 weeks later when it's essentially too late. And most egregiously is everything in the financial sector. We see AI continuously hallucinating line items and balances, P&Ls and invoices, everything that is both transactional and also financial statements. And in every case, the commonality, the failure mode was that the model was incredibly confident. And so that is what we call black box failure in production. Now, the main reason why agents make this mistake is because they are forced to provide a single answer, right? For those of you in the audience who are machine learning engineers or have a background in machine learning engineering, you'll know that inference and this incredible world of statistical compute is nothing other than letter by letter, token by token loop. And it's essentially a massive autocomplete system. And the problem is every step, every token is essentially an opportunity for the model to get it wrong or get it right. And there is a probability score behind it. Most black box systems do not use that probability. They just don't. There's no confidence, there is no trace, there's no remediation, there's no correction. What we see more and more is glass box systems that answer with a confidence score per field, a trace of every input, and a correction surface where an operator can fix these issues. Corrections and operators are sort of a what the industry has been calling human in the loop. And it's interesting because a lot of the companies we work with think of human in the loop as labor. It is going to take time and money to actually introduce a human in the loop. And they try to err on the side of AI systems that do not require a human in the loop. The biggest issue is the way we think about human in the loop is actually not pre-production as a team of labelers that is just spending millions of dollars labeling data. We actually think of human in the loop in the production scenario, sometimes even customer facing. So for a lot of the customers that I work with, human in the loop in an insurance field, for example, is a underwriting expert or a claims expert or an actuary. But when it comes to customer facing automation, That human in the loop is the customer. And we've seen greater success with using the customer's input to actually tap into that knowledge and feed those corrections back to the system. And so at the end, what you want from enterprise AI that is production ready is three properties that are very, very simple. One is visibility. You would be doing well in finding systems that give you exactly how confident the model is on a per field level, not just document. What does 95% mean? Is 95 correct and 5% is doubtful? Is it hallucinated? So you need to be very, very clear and have the ability to route to a human before they cause damage. The second one is being able to audit the system. How visible it is actually affects how auditable it is, especially if you work in a field that is highly regulated. When I work, for example, in finance, a lot of our customers actually use BEM to process, for example, financial statements and make investment decisions. It's very important that the system actually gives them a decision trace. And the third one is improvement. A AI system that has no improvement loop is an AI system that will never improve. And that, in my opinion, is the biggest advantage of having AI and large language models and vision models in your stack is the fact that they can improve. And so when you procure automation for your business, you need to think about it from the perspective of how does it actually improve and how does it get smarter? Now, we're going back to visibility. We think systems should be telling you right out of the gate what it is they're unsure of before you ask. For most of the systems that we see in the market today, field level uncertainty is something that you need to ask for proactively rather than something that is a routing signal between automation and human review. We're actually entering, and this gets a little bit philosophical, we're actually entering into a world where semi automated companies are using AI to task humans, not the other way around. And that's the beauty of true ambient systems is not when a human has to be on top of the AI, but when the AI is essentially a new organizational paradigm that assigns tasks. And so now I have a live demo to show you. Obviously, this is done with our product, BEM, but you can think of it as any sort of situation where you need to extract data from a bank account statement. And funny enough, I will give you all an anecdote about this little demo that we built. But essentially, I used our product, BEM, to extract transactional data out of this sample bank account statement that we found online. And you will know in a second why this is a sample, because the anecdote here is that when I built this demo, I actually thought this was a real statement uploaded by someone on the internet. The model identified better than we did that this statement is actually fabricated. And so we actually learned when onboarding a few of our financial customers that the confidence routing isn't just telling us when the model is making mistakes, it's also telling us when the data is, for lack of a better word, sketchy. And so you'll see that so we have BEM provides both a non schema constrained extraction, just like what we call parsing the entire document, as well as schema constrained extraction. In this example, schema constrained extraction is actually really great for automating processes because you expect always the same output. You can see here that it's for the most part very confident about every extraction. It also tells you why. And then I noticed when I was processing this that it was actually a little unsure about the dates. And I didn't know why, because all the other dates seemed to be a little bit better. But then I realized that the cut state dates and periods are actually from October 11 to November 10. And so the model is actually surfacing that some of these dates are actually incorrect because they fall outside of the period. So that gives, if you do human in the loop routing, that actually flags to a human, hey, there's probably fraud in this statement. We see these bank account statements being used to underwrite transactions, loans, credit, all the time. And similarly with the amounts, the fact that there's amounts on a subtotal instead of on a per unit basis. And so funny enough, this type of confidence routing has started being used by our own customers as a fraud detection mechanism and fabrication detection mechanism. And so the type of security that we need in this new era of AI is no longer just about whether the model is hallucinating. It's also the model's ability to understand if the data is, as I mentioned earlier, sketchy. Now, imagine this bank account statement falls through the cracks and a credit or a loan is underwritten with fabricated data. Most companies we work with don't do double verification. What if your financial system isn't connecting to a source of truth like a plat or like a direct digital feed? You would just rely entirely on what the customer is providing you. And so this is just an example, obviously. When I mean auditability, every decision, in this case, we have classification in the product, needs to be directly routed to why and where and how. And so my suggestion to the audience is when you procure automation for your business, especially if you're working in a regulated field, you want a system that explains itself, not a system that you have to apply millions of dollars to explain behind the scenes. The second property is auditability. I mentioned it before. Every output should carry its work. And so if you have auditors or regulators or internal risk teams, they will need to ask why and how a specific decision was produced. In my opinion, this is a precondition for deployment, especially for a lot of customers that I work with on insurance, healthcare, financial services. Without an audit trail, what you have is a science project, not a real system. And third but not least, you know, last but not least is improvements. A correction should make the system smarter, not just patch one output. Everything with low confidence should lead to something with high confidence. AI isn't perfect. And even when you have the perfect harness and system, it's still not perfect. And so you need to make sure that every outcome in production feeds the model. And the problem with black boxes is they plateau very easily. And so glass boxes need to improve because everything does. So, for the room, 6 questions to ask before you deploy an agent. One, can you see per field confidence on every output? Is there a routing surface that allows a human to intervene? Is there, for any given decision, can you produce a full trace in under a minute? When an operator corrects, does that correction get the system better? In 6 months, what is the evidence that accuracy will be higher? And last but not least, if a regulator showed up tomorrow, would your AI infrastructure be a help or a liability? Because it will happen, and more this is going to get regulated. And so the takeaway for you all is please build agents on glass boxes or buy systems that allow you to look at the agent as a glass box. In my opinion, the companies that are winning today are not the ones that win with the biggest models. They are the ones that come with full visibility, audit trail, and correction loops. When the cost of being wrong is in the millions of dollars, you should know your error rate before you make the decision, not after. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it back to Michael.
Antonio, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. I know a lot of individuals in the audience are probably filled with questions as to how this applies directly to their organization or their industry. And I know that you'll be joining us on our next live Q&A panel in just a few minutes to field any questions that anyone in the audience has. But one question that I have: are
Mhm.
there certain organizations that you see day in and day out that are working with these kinds of challenges and constraints?
Yes, daily, especially financial institutions that are heavily regulated. We've seen two levels of access to AI. The ones that are not in the critical path, that's questions and answers over documents, very easy, very non critical. But the ones that are further ahead and starting to automate critical processes, they're facing this constantly because imagine receiving images of checks or remittance and there is a comma out of place. The damage could be in the millions of dollars per occurrence. And so we see this especially in finance.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, in front of you, you have a Q&A box where you can type all of your questions for Antonio. Get as many of those in over the next few minutes. And on this next panel, we'll get to as many of those as we can. And Antonio, once again, thank you for that fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much.